In the second column from the left, down at the bottom there, those were giant blooms. And you can also see the very next year, 2012 and 2016, very, very small blooms. We are incredibly fortunate that the retention time for water in the Western Basin is only about 50 days. That retention time for water is really important when you look at solving these problems at other lakes in Indiana or around the world. If you have a large lake with a large retention time for water, it's going to be much harder to solve these problems. Basically, in 2011 and 2015, we have a very wet spring. Large amount of phosphorus went into the lake. We have a giant algal bloom. In 2012 and 2016, the very next year, we have a drought year. No agricultural runoff. Very small amount of phosphorus goes in. You have a very small bloom. What it tells you is if you reduce the amount of phosphorus going into the lake, the blooms go away immediately. An idea of the bloom from 2011 covered the water intakes for 2.8 million people with a harmful algal bloom. We've also learned that not all phosphorus is created equal. We think about total phosphorus. When you hear someone talk about total phosphorus, they're talking about both particulate phosphorus, this is phosphorus attached to sediment particles, and dissolved phosphorus, the phosphorus that dissolves in the water itself. The dissolved phosphorus, often called dissolved reactive phosphorus, DRP up there, is by plants and algae. This is what farmers want. That's what their crops can use. That's what we want when we apply it to our grass. That's what our lawns can use. That DRP, 100% bioavailable, is what's really driving this problem because it's up 132%. We've also learned that it comes out of our drainage tiles. And we'll talk more about tiling. But I was taught when I took agronomy in 1970 that phosphorus will attach to sediment particles and come off the surface. So if you control erosion, you'll keep the phosphorus on your farm. We now know that phosphorus is dissolving in the water, coming out through the tiles and also coming off in surface runoff, and it's the DRP that's causing the problem. But most of our effort, most of our best management practices have focused on the particulate phosphorus. So we've learned things that we didn't know, the things that we were taught, the things that most farmers were taught are simply not true. Give you an idea, and we've all seen this, more and more tiling going on every year. And I'm not saying that tiling is bad, because it's almost the only way many of these farms can be farmed. But there are steps that we can take, and I'll show you some of those, that allow the tiling to occur, allow crop production to remain high, but keep the nutrients on the field. Rapidly go through these. All right, this is sort of a history of tile drainage in Ohio and Indiana when you think about the Great Black Swamp, but that started in 1820. If you look at 1970, that's when we started seeing the plastic tile come in instead of the clay tile. In 1980, again, I took agronomy in 1970. In 1980, we started telling people at all of our ag colleges, so Purdue, Michigan State, Ohio State, telling them that, well, P loss is marginal through the tiles, or negligible through the tiles. About 2000, we're saying, well, in certain conditions, you can get it coming through the tiles. And by about 2014, we're seeing a whole lot of it come through the tiles. So we've learned a lot, and the things that we're telling farmers, the things that we're working on for best management practices have changed significantly. Red areas, you look at Western Ohio and Eastern Indiana, there's really no other place in the country that has the amount of tiling that we have in this area. That's one of the big reasons that we're seeing the big increases in dissolved reactive phosphorus. So to solve the problem, in the 60s and the 70s, we needed a 62% reduction. Today, we need a 40% reduction. That's based on the load from 2008. I chaired the task force that came up with these numbers for our Ohio Phosphorus Task Force in 2013. International Joint Commission, US and Canada, confirmed those numbers in 2013, agreed with that for both the U.S. and Canadian federal governments. As part of the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement, through Annex 4, we went back and investigated this, and in 2015 came out with our report. You can go onto the websites and read this if you'd like to, but essentially we're calling for a 40% reduction in the spring load, again 1 March to the end of July, to address harmful algal blooms, and to address the dead zone, we're calling for a 40% reduction in the annual load to address the dead zone. Note, I have underlined there the flow-weighted mean concentration. When you think about agricultural runoff, you can't really target a load because the load is determined by how much rainfall you get each year. Well, you can target those, the flow-weighted mean concentration, the concentration of phosphorus in the water that's leaving the fields, and that's what we need to be shooting for, the 0.23 milligrams total phosphorus and the 0.05 for the DR, or dissolved reactive phosphorus. The US and Canada, the governments agreed to those numbers in February of 2016. The shaded areas on here show you the size of the blooms in western Lake Erie. The green, dark green, shows you what the bloom would have looked like if we had achieved the 40% reduction or met our flow-weighted mean concentration targets. So rapidly you'll see that we're not, with those targets, we're not trying to completely eliminate blooms. Our goal is to produce a bloom that, if you look at the chart there, the goal is to produce a bloom that looks like the bloom that occurred in 2004 or 2012. 9 years out of 10, recognizing that 1 year out of 10, we're going to have a bloom that's going to be bigger than 2004 or 2012, but we really like blooms like 2004 or 2012 or smaller 9 years out of 10. Weakness in this, and we identified in our report, is climate change. If we continue to see more rainfall, larger spring storm events, we will see blooms worse than 2004 or worse than 2012 more frequently than 1 year out of 10. So an easy way to sort of think about this and keep track of it, battles of Lake Erie. So we fought the first battle of Lake Erie in the War of 1812. We fought it with tall ships. We fought the second battle of Lake Erie, that's my hand up there at the top right, 1971. We fought that one with sewage treatment plants. Third battle of Lake Erie, that's my hand, older arm, better watch, I was told. 2013, we're going to have to fight this one with best management practices for agriculture. We can keep our crop production high, but we have to change the way we do it. And notice a different color on those 71 in 2013, simply different species. 1971, Aphanosomena, 2013, Microcystis, different species of blue-greens. So recommendations, how do we solve this? The most important things to keep in mind, don't apply too much when you're putting on phosphorus or manure. And our studies have shown that if you apply phosphorus and manure at the same amount, there's no, commercial fertilizer and manure at the same amount, there's no difference. The problem is that we usually apply manure at much higher than needed amounts. That creates a big problem for us. So the first thing is use soil test, follow the tri-state guidelines, don't apply too much, apply what you need, you're going to keep crop production high. The second one is don't do a broadcast application, insert the fertilizer. The third one is try to reduce your erosion. And the fourth one is what we call drainage water management. Improve your soil quality, try to increase the amount of carbon so your soil holds more water, so you reduce the amount of water leaving your fields. A picture on the left, inserting the fertilizer, picture on the right, broadcast application. This is a spreading manure at the surface, pretty much liquid now. And this gives you an idea when you have poor soil quality, you get large cracks, and the cracks that you see here, I've seen much larger than this. But poor soil quality leads to the cracks. Those create direct pathways to the tile. So when you apply manure or commercial fertilizer on that, you get any kind of a runoff event, you're literally putting raw manure into your tiles and then out into the lakes. We've put together a white paper. I'm going to show you a link at the end of the talk to this white paper that describes everything that I've talked about here, and this is going to be published in the Journal of Great Lakes Research within the next couple months. But the link at the end will show you how to get to this white paper and get more information on all of these best management practices and the things that we've learned about farmer attitudes toward these best management practices. For instance, we see about 1/3 of the farmers willing or already doing the best management practices, about another third that we think will do it, and the third, there's no way they're going to do it. And give you a better understanding of how that was done and what we've learned in that process. Best management practices for farmers. One of the good things to do is follow the 4 R's. Right time, right place, use the right amount of fertilizer. The most important R's in the 4 R's are how it's applied, so applying it the right way, and that's inserting it and applying the right amount. We now know that that subsurface placement, inserting the fertilizer down 3 to 5 inches right where the seed needs it as it's growing, that reduces the amount of DRP leaving the field annually by 46%, 42% in the spring, and reduces total phosphorus by 29%. Bottom line is, if everybody did that, the problem goes away. That also means that we're putting on the right amount. So those 2 R's, getting everyone to do that, solves the problem. Tile risers, you've all seen these, maybe call them Hickenbottoms, where a low spot in a field, and you essentially bring the tile right to the surface and stick it up a couple feet, and the water drains right into that. If you change the tile risers to a blind inlet, you reduce the amount of phosphorus leaving from the area drained by the tile risers by 60%. Drainage water management can reduce phosphorus leaving by 50%. For every percentage point increase in the amount of carbon in the soil, improving soil quality, every percentage point increase allows that soil to hold about 3/4 of an inch more rain during a storm event. Incredibly important. Also on cover crops, important stuff. We've learned that cover crops are looking really good at reducing nitrogen loading, but I'd say the jury's still out. Got 2 minutes here, so I've got to really scramble. 3 ways to solve this. Outreach and education to try to get farmers to do it voluntarily. Unfortunately, there's no evidence that the voluntary approach is working. We've seen 0 change in the last 2 years in the number of farmers inserting and the number of farmers using cover crops. We can use incentives and disincentives to encourage the voluntary adoption, or we can go to regulations or public health, environmental safeguards to mandate action. If you look at the chart on the right there, what this shows is literally, I'm just trying to show that with all the work we've done in the last 10 years, all the things that are going on, we're seeing 0 change in that flow-weighted mean concentration. 0 change. The challenge, there's no evidence that voluntary is going to work based on the environmental, economic, human health impacts. Can we afford to wait longer? The challenge for us is really to come up with the most effective actions to take, and we need to be thinking about the incentives, the disincentives, and the regulations or the safeguards. And we've got to identify permanent solutions, not solutions that are based on commodity prices. Think about those recommendations from the SERA-17 conference that I said before. Apply the right amount, insert, control your erosion, and manage your drainage water management, the water leaving the field. You're going to fight the 4 Ds. This came from, we think about the 4 Rs. One of the national ag groups from Solutions for the Land has identified one of the challenges we have is that many within the ag community might be using the duct, deny, delay, deflect approach. I can tell you right now that lawn care is off the table. Scott's removed fertilizer from their lawn care products on everything except for their starter fertilizer in January of 2013. CSOs represent 1% of the load. Septic tanks, failing septic tanks represent 4% of the load. In fact, if we eliminated all sewage treatment, all point sources, the load goes down by only 10%. The challenge that you're going to have is how this cycle goes on each year, and you're going to have to be persistent in addressing it. Typically what happens, starting at the top, we identify a problem, we do a lot of research to understand the problem. The impacted parties, the cities, individuals demand actions. The impactors seek more research, more information, better understanding. The elected officials, if they're controlled or led by the impacted parties, they get a real significant action. If they're led by the people who are the impactors, you get more of a token or a less significant action. We look at the actions, we evaluate the impact of the actions. Where we are right now, we've evaluated the impact of all our actions and we're not seeing any change yet. So we're back to the top and we will repeat the cycle. And we've repeated it a number of times already. With that, I will stop. Apologize for, I think I'm probably 3 minutes, but I do appreciate the warnings. And Jesse, should I take any questions? Hold off on those. Couple, okay. And I think they're on the way up. But again, my hat's off to the people in the room. The solution lies in this room, and recognize that I'm not trying to demonize agriculture at all. Agriculture is the major source, but there's a lot of farmers who are already doing the right things. We simply have to figure out a way to get everybody to do it.
So we already have a couple of questions collected. Continue to write questions on index cards and pass those to our volunteers. Here's one from someone who's on Lake Chautauqua, where they're currently using herbicides to contain algae and seaweeds. What harms can we present to the county to stop this practice? What besides controlling runoff could we do instead of those herbicides?
Yeah. Herbicides and I liken this to if you come home, you've been out and you come home and you have a burst water line in your house. Do you immediately grab a mop and try to start mopping up that water, or do you run and shut off the water main to the house to stop the water from coming in? Okay. That's very much the situation that you're looking at in Lake Chautauqua. We did, in many ways, the same thing on Grand Lake St. Mary's. You focus on the problem rather than the source. And the most important thing that you have to do is reduce the load, then you can start dealing with problems within the lake.
We've got some great questions coming in. The second one is, are the toxins persistent after or between blooms, and what effect are they having on aquatic life?
Standards, I'll answer this one quick. They last 30 days, move around, unclear impacts on aquatic life. We see that it's being taken up by fish. That's a concern, not at levels that are causing a health concern at this point, but for instance, the walleye hatch for 2018 is almost a record walleye hatch. So keep your fingers crossed, but it looks like the toxins are not harming the fishery.
Thank you. In the interest of keeping our program on track, I'm afraid I'm going to have to limit this to just one more question. However, it's my understanding that Dr. Reuter has graciously agreed to stay through to the discussion sections that we have scheduled starting at 3:30 this afternoon. So we'll bring those questions back at that time. But for a last question, can we make farm subsidies contingent on employing best practices, especially for the large corporate farms?
Great question, and incredibly important, because it's likely that sometime during the next few weeks in this lame duck sort of session, we'll get the Farm Bill passed. The Farm Bill is an incredible opportunity. I don't expect us to see the changes in the Farm Bill this year that we need to have. But the Farm Bill is something that we should all be, in AGC, the council should be focused on that Farm Bill every year and looking for opportunities to take advantage of the incentives and create disincentives. Right now, typically in agriculture, when you think about incentives and disincentives or carrots and sticks, we have only carrots. And any good economist will tell you that the only good incentive program is an incentive program that has equally strong disincentives. So the Farm Bill is something that we need to focus on because it's probably going to be the best way to address this if we don't move through individual state regulations or safeguards. Thanks.